Every winter, survival tip you have ever been handed, the emergency blanket, the hand warmer packet, the freeze-dried meal pouch, was designed by people who had never truly been cold. Not frontier cold, not minus 45 degrees with ink freezing in a journal and a thermometer bursting its glass in the night cold. The men and women who survived those winters, mountain men, native peoples, fur trade voyageurs working the rivers of the 1800s American frontier, did it with almost nothing that you would recognize from a modern camping aisle. No Gore-Tex, no insulated sleeping bag, no protein bar, just 15 techniques handed down over generations, so effective that the people who used them didn't just survive the worst winters on the continent, they thrived in them. And almost every single one of those techniques has been forgotten, replaced, or quietly buried by an industry that makes considerably more money selling you the substitute than teaching you the original. Picture a trapper camp on the Knife River in North Dakota, January of 1805. The thermometer that Meriwether Lewis had brought from Philadelphia had burst its glass at 45 below. Ink froze in journals between sentences, and yet the Mandan people who lived in the Great Earth, lodges on that same riverbank, were not huddled and suffering. They were warm. Their lodges, 30 to 60 feet across, roofed with 2 feet of packed earth over willow brush and prairie grass, the floor sunk a foot below grade, held steady at a livable temperature while the open prairie outside was a killing field of wind and cold. Lewis and Clark documented it. They had come prepared with the finest equipment the United States government could assemble, and they were the ones rationing candles and trading forged tomahawks to their Mandan neighbors just to get enough dried corn to last the winter. So what did these people know? What was the system that kept them alive when everything modern logic says should have killed them? And why does almost no one teach it anymore? Before we get into it, drop a comment right now and tell me this. Have you ever been so cold that you stop feeling cold? That strange warmth that creeps in, the one that feels like relief but is actually your body shutting down? Because what you are about to learn is the reason that happened, and more importantly, why it never happened to the people on this river in 1805. Tell me below. And stay with me, because what comes next will change how you see every winter from here on out. Here is the modern version of winter preparedness, and it is worth looking at hard. You walk into any outdoor retailer today, and the shelves are stacked with chemical hand warmers, Mylar emergency blankets, high-protein energy bars, and synthetic fill jackets with R values printed on hang tags. The protein bars are made from processed isolates. The Mylar blankets reflect heat but create condensation. The synthetic fill compresses when wet and loses half its insulating capacity, and the whole system is designed around one idea, that warmth is something you buy. The Mountain Man system was built on the opposite idea. Warmth was something you metabolized, built, and carried inside your own body. And here is where it gets interesting, because the first and most important technique had nothing to do with clothing at all. It had everything to do with what went into your mouth. Let us talk about why the men on that Knife River were not hungry, not cold, not broken. The Mandan and Hidatsa peoples, along with every professional trapper and voyager who lasted more than one winter in the northern Rockies, had figured out something that modern nutritional culture has spent 50 years talking people out of. Fat is not the enemy. Fat is the engine. Technique 1, eat rendered fat deliberately and in quantity every single day of winter. The mechanism here is not complicated, but it is stunning. Your body in extreme cold burns through carbohydrates almost immediately and then turns to dietary fat as its primary fuel source. This is not optional. It is biochemistry. And there is a ceiling on how much protein your body can process safely. Push past it and you develop what the Cree called mal de caribou, rabbit starvation, a condition where you are technically eating but slowly dying, your body flooded with urea it cannot clear. Diarrhea sets in within a week. Weakness follows. Death comes within weeks, even while eating. The mountain men knew this the way they knew how to read weather. They had a saying, poor bull, fat cow, meaning A lean male bison in rut was nearly worthless as food in winter, and a fat cow in her prime was survival in hide form. Explorers Vilhjalmur Stephenson and Clarence Banting confirmed this through a full-year supervised clinical experiment in 1928. When fat was withdrawn from an all-meat diet, rabbit starvation symptoms appeared within 3 days. Fat restored. Symptoms vanished within 2. The practical tool built around this was pemmican, and nothing like it has existed before or since. The Plains tribes have been making it for generations before any European laid eyes on North America. The formula was precise. Take dried buffalo meat, pound it fine, mix it with an equal weight of rendered tallow, kidney fat, back fat, the thick dapouille or fleece that ran 2 inches deep along the buffalo's spine. Fold in dried chokecherries or Saskatoon berries and seal it hot inside a green buffalo hide bag. As the rawhide dried, it shrank, compressing and sealing the contents without air. The result delivered roughly 3,500 calories per pound. 1 to 2 pounds per man per day kept a voyager paddling 14 hours in frozen headwinds, and properly made pemmican kept for years. Not weeks, years. Compare that to the average protein bar sitting in your kitchen drawer right now. A few hundred calories, mostly sugar. A shelf life that companies measure in months because the fats they used were so heavily processed they go rancid in half a season. That is not a snack. That is a business model. Here is the part that should genuinely make you stop and think. Pemmican was so strategically important in the early 1800s that 2 of the largest commercial empires on the continent went to war over it. The Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company fought the Pemmican War from 1812 to 1821. Actual violence, raids on supply caches, armed confrontation, over control of the pemmican supply chain in Red River Country, a food that required no refrigeration, no preservatives, no processing facility, just meat, fat, and knowledge. The knowledge is what they took from you, not the ingredients. Technique 2, the underground cache. Meriwether Lewis documented this on June 9, 1805, at the mouth of the Marias River in present-day Montana. His journal describes a process so precise it reads like an engineering specification. A 20-inch circular opening in the ground, dug carefully with the sod plug preserved intact. The hole widened kettle-shaped below, 6 to 7 feet deep, floored with dry sticks and hide to keep contents off the earth. Everything packed in tightly, the mouth sealed with hide, and then the original sod plug. And then, critically, all loose dirt thrown into a nearby stream so the ground appeared completely undisturbed. Lewis and Clark used the system across the entire expedition. When they had to abandon supplies on the westward push, they cached them. When one of their Montana caches flooded, they lost Lewis's entire plant specimen collection from Fort Mandan westward, one of the great scientific losses of the expedition. The Mandan and Hidatsa had been doing it longer, bell-shaped pits dug beneath earth lodge floors, narrow at the mouth, expanding to 5 feet across at the base, 8 feet deep, plastered with clay to deter rodents, lined with willow and grass, stored dried corn, beans, squash, and pemmican through winters that lasted 6 months. You had food before the freeze. You had food when nothing moved and the snow was 5 feet deep. You had food in spring. The system was complete, not a survival strategy, an infrastructure. Technique 3, the earth lodge itself. If you are finding this valuable, go ahead and hit like right now, because we are only getting deeper from here. The Mandan Earth Lodge was not a primitive structure. It was an engineered thermal system, 30 to 60 feet in diameter. The floor sunk 12 to 24 inches below grade, immediately stealing warmth from the earth itself. 4 central log posts supporting a radial rafter system packed with willow brush, then prairie grass, then 2 feet of compacted earth. The entry was a 6 to 15-foot tunnel, angled against the prevailing wind, a natural airlock that prevented cold from driving straight into the living space. When Lewis and Clark wintered at Fort Mandan in 1804 and 1805, they built their own log fort 60 feet from these lodges. Their thermometers cracked. Their sentries reported frostbite after 30 minutes of watch. Neighboring lodges kept families of 40 people warm and fed through the same winter. The Mandan did not wait until the cold came to prepare. They built the system in advance and lived inside it. Technique 4, the Tipi liner. The plains teepee's genius is almost entirely invisible from the outside. What most people see is a cone of hides on poles. What they miss is the inner liner. A 6-foot-tall curtain of hide hung from a rope strung around the interior poles, falling to the ground and creating a separate inner wall. That channel between the cover and the liner functioned as a chimney. Cold air entered at the base, was drawn up by the central fire, and pulled smoke out through the apex vent, which could be adjusted with external flap poles from inside. The liner added a still air insulating gap and a separate overhead canvas. The ozone caught sparks and reflected radiant heat downward over the sleeping area. The entire system breathed, heated, and vented itself through the physics of convection. Not one chemical, not one synthetic material, just geometry and understanding of how air moves. Technique 5, the fire you never let die. The Pekuni Blackfoot had a solution to fire starting in brutal cold that the U.S. Forest Service Missoula Fire Sciences Lab validated in research with the Blackfeet Community College. A hollow buffalo horn. Inside it, a bed of moist, rotten punky wood. A live coal placed on a flat stone at the center. Chaga fungus, the black shelf growth on birch trees, processed into amadou, packed around the coal, the horn capped with cattail duff and moss. A man could carry a live coal for hours through a blizzard inside that horn, and when he reached camp, he could produce a flame in minutes. Ethnologist George Bird Grinnell quoted a Blackfoot elder directly in 1913. The trick of the long log fire followed directly from this, not the roaring bonfire of the Hollywood frontier, which was good for warming hands and catastrophically inefficient for sleeping. The long fire, 2 parallel debarked logs, laid flat face to flat face with small wedges between them, lit along the entire interior seam. A 6-foot log burned quietly for 6 to 9 hours, paired with a half-faced camp, 3 log walls, a sloping bark roof, the open face toward the fire, a reflector wall of stacked logs behind the flames to bounce the heat back inward. A man could sleep warm in -20. Technique 6, buckskin and wool, layered with intent. The mountain man clothing system was not about one garment, it was about sequence. Wool or linen, next to skin to wick sweat away from the body. Over that, a wool waistcoat. Over that, a brain-tanned buckskin shirt, quiet in brush, windproof when dry, catastrophic when wet, which is why the buffalo robe came third. Hair in, hide out, a winter prime buffalo robe weighing 20-some pounds, wrapped and belted, beaver felt hat or fox cap, oversized moccasins packed with dry grass or bison wool for insulation, mittens, always mittens over gloves, because fingers pooled their warmth together and gloves isolated them. Lewis and Clark's November 1805 journal describes the entire system failing in the rain of the Pacific coast. 8 consecutive days soaking, leather clothing rotting, robes stiff and useless. They stitched 358 pairs of moccasins for the return journey alone. The system worked in its intended climate. In the wrong climate, it failed. This was a technology built for a specific world, precisely calibrated to that world's conditions. Technique 7, pine needle tea, and the medicine the Iroquois gave Jacques Cartier. In the winter of 1535 to 1536, Jacques Cartier's expedition was frozen into the St. Lawrence at what is now Quebec City. Of 110 men, 25 had died of scurvy, and only 10 remained healthy by February. A man named Domagaya, son of the Iroquoian chief Donnacona, watched the dying and offered the French a remedy. Boil the bark and leaves of a tree he called aneta, almost certainly eastern white cedar. The French survivors drank the tea. Within days, they recovered. Cartier called it the tree of life. The mechanism is straightforward. Winter-harvested pine and spruce needles carry vitamin C at roughly 4 to 7 times the concentration of summer growth. No orange required. No supplement bottle. just the tree standing 6 feet from where you're sleeping, offering medicine through every month that the scurvy would otherwise kill you. Here is where the picture becomes clear. All of this, and the pemmican, the cache, the lodge, the fire horn, the robe, the tea, was abandoned, not because something better replaced it, but because something faster and cheaper replaced it. The industrial food system needed shelf-stable products it could ship and sell. The garment industry needed synthetic fill it could manufacture at scale. The pharmaceutical system needed vitamin C in a bottle with a patent on the process. Speed, cost, a new technology that made the old one seem unnecessary. And in every single case, the replacement was optimized for profit and convenience, not for the person inside the cold. The problem isn't you. You were handed broken tools and told they were upgrades, your body trying to stay warm in a synthetic sleeping bag in a nylon tent at 20 below is not a personal failure. It is the predictable outcome of a system that replaced knowledge with product and called it progress. So here's what you can actually do. Start with the easiest thing: fat, not processed seed oils, not margarine. Rendered animal fat, beef tallow, lard, duck fat, cooked with your meals through every cold month. Your body will respond. You will stop craving carbohydrates at 8 in the evening. Your hands will stay warmer longer. This is not folklore. This is how the human body actually runs. Next, make a simple pemmican batch. Take lean beef, slice it thin against the grain, dry it in your oven at the lowest setting for 6 to 8 hours until it snaps clean. Powder it. Mix it with an equal weight of melted beef tallow. Press it into bars or bags and let it cool. That is the entire process. No lab, no factory, no subscription. It will keep in a cool, dry place for months without refrigeration. Eat it in winter and notice what happens to your energy levels. And if you do nothing else, when the temperature drops this year, pay attention to what you eat in the days before you go out into the cold. Fat-heavy meal the night before a long outdoor day. Pemmican or tallow-rich food in your pack, not a protein bar. The difference in warmth you feel will not be subtle. The men who lived on that Knife River in 1805 were not made of different material than you. They were not tougher at some cellular level. They had inherited a system tested across hundreds of winters by people who could not afford to get it wrong. They understood that a human body in extreme cold is a furnace that requires the right fuel, the right shelter built before the storm, the right fire managed through the night, and the right partners sleeping close enough that their warmth becomes yours. Jim Bridger spent 30 years in the Rockies. Osborne Russell trapped 9 consecutive winters across the northern mountains and wrote it all down. Hugh Glass crawled 250 miles home in September, cold with a broken leg and a borrowed bear hide, because he had been taught, at a level deeper than thought, that survival is not luck. It is a system. The knowledge was never lost. It was traded away, exchanged for convenience, for speed, for the quarterly profits of industries that needed you to believe the old ways were too primitive to trust. They were not primitive. They were complete. Subscribe if you want more of what the modern world quietly buried. We are digging up the systems, the techniques, and the knowledge that actually worked, from the frontier to the homestead to the wilderness, and putting it back in your hands where it belongs. And tell us in the comments, what survival topic do you want us to investigate next? Because there is a great deal more where this came from, and we are just getting started.